If you spend any time driving through Maine, you'll probably notice something unique. Small cemeteries appear along back roads, tucked between forests, fields, and stone walls. Sometimes there are just a few graves, sometimes dozens, and they're everywhere. So why does Maine seem to have so many roadside cemeteries? Today we're exploring the history behind them and what they reveal about how Maine developed. Maine is home to thousands of small historic cemeteries. In fact, it has been documented that there are over 7,100 burial sites across the state, and that number continues to grow as more are discovered. Many of these cemeteries date back to the 1700s and 1800s, tied to early settlement patterns when families often buried loved ones on their own land or in small community plots. The organization working to document and preserve many of these historic sites is the Maine Old Cemetery Association.
We have over 1,000 members at this point in time. The goal is to make people knowledgeable about what the cemeteries and their importance, to educate them, to preserve the cemeteries, to conserve, to try and make people understand the importance of these small cemeteries. I grew up in a town where my ancestors had been there since the 1790s. And my mother was town clerk for over 25 years. She would get letters from genealogists wanting to know this, that, and the other thing. She worked during the week at an outside job. On the weekend, she would pile us all into the car. We would go off to the cemeteries so she could answer these letters accurately. A lot of people have different interests. I mean, some people like cemeteries for the art. There's gorgeous art. Some like the epitaphs, the poems, where did that come from? What is it telling me about the person? And some care to save our history that's there. And for me, it was just, I grew up in cemeteries with my mother, so I just was always curious about them.
In the 1700s and early 1800s, Maine was largely made up of small, spread-out settlements, not centralized towns. Homes and farms were often separated by miles of forest, and in many areas, there were no established public cemeteries yet. As a result, families typically buried loved ones close to home on a corner of their land, a small rise, or a well-drained area that could be used year-round. Over time, these private burial plots often became informal community cemeteries used by nearby families as well. What started as practical decisions, distance, terrain, and limited infrastructure, is a big part of why so many of these small cemeteries still exist today, often in places that feel unexpected.
It was very, very common for a family who wasn't near a town, near a church, near a graveyard. They would bury their family on their own farm, typically on a knoll, a high place that was fairly dry, and not a place they were cultivating for their farm crops or their animals.
Many of these cemeteries weren't originally next to roads at all. In early Maine, what roads did exist were often rough paths, cart tracks, or seasonal routes connecting scattered farms and settlements, not the paved road system we see today. As towns developed through the 1800s, these informal paths were gradually expanded, straightened, and formalized into public roads. In many cases, it was more practical to build along existing routes or property lines than to avoid burial sites. So instead of moving cemeteries, roads were built around them or directly alongside them. Over time, that created the pattern we see today, where these small historic cemeteries appear to sit right on the edge of the road, but they were actually there first.
Over time, roads changed, people changed. Maybe what was on someone's farm ended up on a roadside. Or it was a road and there are 3 families in the area. Oh, let's all pick somebody's land that's close. It's easier to get there. I know a number of places where there were roads and then they had a cemetery and then, whoops, the road's gone. So it works both ways.
Maine didn't develop like the dense towns of Europe, where one central churchyard served an entire community. Instead, early settlements were spread across farms, forests, and small village clusters, often miles apart. Because of that scattered settlement pattern, it wasn't practical or even possible for one cemetery to serve everyone. Families created small burial plots on their own land, and neighbors often added their own. Over time, this resulted in dozens of tiny cemeteries within a single town or township, each reflecting the local family, early settlers, or particular communities that use them.
It's just that Maine was so rural compared to other places that Tom Jones might have gone out to live on top of a mountain somewhere. He got married, he had a family, grandkids. They used their own personal land for a small cemetery. People moved as groups. There might be a minister way back who moved to somewhere, and others in his congregation would follow and go to that area. The ruralness of it made a difference. Or someplace became more settled, more of a town. I can think of one place in Starks particularly. On the early maps, you see village cemetery. By 1880, there is no village cemetery. Those people were moved, or at least the stones, because somebody died of smallpox. We don't want them buried in the center of our town. There was no sense of what caused some of these illnesses. And they'd get a group of people together and they might decide that, oh, the contagion is something we don't want. If there was a Revolutionary War soldier buried there, the widow had a pension. Within her pension, it will say, David Sterry was buried in Village Cemetery. When you go around town and you find a marker for David Sterry in Greenleaf Cemetery, you know that some of those people were moved to Greenleaf. But all people did not have grave markers. And I tend to say grave markers as opposed to gravestones, in that wooden markers, cement markers, there are things that aren't stone that are still marking graves. This state has thousands of unmarked graves. They could have been marked with wooden markers that are no longer there. They could have been marked with field stones, just stones you would find in your field, that have sunk, that people have not realized that this is a cemetery and that, oh, I want to plow here, and the stones are gone. But people also need to know that the stone you see on that grave might not have been set for 20 years. Maybe it was the children, when they started working, had some money. They so often show the hardship for the early settlers. So many people that died young. So many children that died 2-3 years old. So many in the same family might have died within 3 days of each other, which gives you a good clue. You need to, if you're curious, you want to be looking at what epidemics might have been prominent in the area at the time.
Of course, I don't just talk about Maine, I help people move here too. I'm Kyle Dennis, host of Meeting Maine and a real estate agent with Pouliot Real Estate. Maine has so much to offer: historic towns, lakes, mountains, and communities full of character. If you've been dreaming about moving, I can help make it real, guiding you through neighborhoods, homes, and all the details that matter. Let's find your place in Maine. One of the reasons these cemeteries are still so visible today is that much of Maine's landscape hasn't been completely redeveloped. Old farms, stone walls, and family burial grounds remain part of the scenery. In many places across the country, small burial plots like these were moved or lost as towns grew. But in Maine, many have stayed right where they've been for centuries. This is one of the things that makes the state so unique. The history here is preserved.
Without volunteers, this organization couldn't do what it does. Some of our members aren't even in Maine. Volunteers are welcome with any society, and particularly with ours, because it's the whole state. Areas that are more settled and have, at this point in time, are more apt to have had transcriptions done. Aroostook County, Hancock County. We don't know where so many of the cemeteries are. And we'd love to. We'd love to get everything that we can in our records. They're available online, and sometimes in the members only section, but we also have submitted records to like the Maine State Library or other places, so it's not, hey, tell us the information and we're keeping it. We want this available. We want people to be interested in cemeteries.
So the next time you're driving along a quiet main road and pass a small cemetery tucked into the trees, it's not just a roadside landmark. It's a reminder of the families who first settled here and of how Maine's landscape still holds pieces of its past.
This is Lynette Strangstad, and she has a book, A Graveyard Preservation Primer. Unlike most histories, graveyards record the lives of all, signify past existences, and recognize one commonality of us all. The history of rich and poor, famous and infamous alike, is recorded here. Histories of entire towns may be present only here, and elements of local history may survive here as nowhere else. Graveyards are often the only record, the only artifacts remaining to tell of lives of individuals and communities struggled for, well lived in the face of sometimes tremendous odds, and finally given up reluctantly or with peaceful composure. And they are our history. There are people who never owned land, who never bought or sold land, who might not have been active in town government. Maybe their families died out. They're going to have, in many cases, a record in that cemetery. And cemetery stones with their epitaphs, there are so many wonderful, wonderful stories written in the epitaphs. There's just nowhere else that some people are going to be recognized.